Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a sigh of relief for hundreds of thousands of workers in California. The new law mandating paid sick leave and the biggest opposition to the San Diego lawmaker who introduced it.
Plus, the next steps for the Carlsbad Desalination Plant following the last pipeline connected on Monday. I'm Peggy Pico with when to expect the water to reach your faucet and how much more it'll cost you. Then, how the devastating Normal Heights fire 30 years ago today changed fire prevention policy throughout San Diego.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The strictest vaccine bill in the nation is now a law in California. Under new legislation signed into law today by Governor Jerry Brown, almost all school children in the state of California will be required to be vaccinated. Prompted in part by an outbreak of measles traced to Disneyland late last year, the legislation eliminates vaccination exemptions based on religious or personal beliefs. It will require all children entering kindergarten to be vaccinated unless a doctor certifies that a child has a medical condition preventing it.
So that anybody with a legitimate scientific or medical reason for not wanting to get vaccinated will be able to go to a doctor and get a medical exemption and then send their kids to school.
Opponents criticize the bill as infringing the rights of parents to make medical decisions for their children. 2 people were diagnosed with tuberculosis in San Diego County. Both are employees of Premier Food Service, a company located at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. Other employees may have been exposed. Health officials say there is no indication anyone in the general public is at risk for exposure. A new pitch from President Obama today to raise the wages for 5 million American workers. The latest effort was highlighted in his Huffington Post op-ed piece. The goal is to boost pay for lower-income workers who would benefit from rules requiring businesses to pay time and a half for any work beyond 40 hours a week. He wrote, "That's how America should do business. In this country, a hard day's work deserves a fair day's pay. That's at the heart of what it means to be middle class in America." With the higher threshold, many more Americans would become eligible for overtime. Businesses might hire additional workers to avoid paying overtime or extend the hours they give part-timers. Starting tomorrow, every worker in California will have a legal right to 3 paid sick days a year. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler says the new law will affect hundreds of thousands of San Diego workers.
Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez authored the new law, AB 1522. It guarantees 3 days of sick leave for all workers. She says her biggest opposition was ignorance.
You get the folks who've always had sick days and they can't understand our vacation time. They didn't know that nobody did, that there were people in this state that did not have sick time.
Gonzalez says many workers never dreamt of taking a day off with pay.
And then you get folks who never even imagined that they could be paid when they took a day off when they're sick.
Workers like Christian Aguirre say having sick days will be a huge relief.
I've had to cut back on groceries, gas, and put off bills as a result of missing work, which is why for parents like me, 3 sick days is a blessing.
Robert Notoff from the Center on Policy Initiative says the new law will hit home for San Diegans.
And here locally, the impacts will be immediate, as 279,000 people, enough to fill Petco Park 6.5 times, will now have access to, finally, to a single day of sick leave.
Next year, labor activists say they'll lobby for even more. They hope to see 5 days of sick leave for San Diego workers become the law of the land. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Tomorrow is the 1st of July, which means the implementation of a few new laws. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife is phasing out the use of lead ammunition on state lands because of its implication on critically endangered California condor. Also starting tomorrow, cell phones made and sold must have a kill switch to deter thieves. And new restrictions on smoke alarms sold in California. Those that detect smoke and carbon monoxide must be sold with a 10-year battery sealed inside. The law is designed to make it more difficult to tamper with alarms. The battle over the ban on plastic bags continues. Backers of the ban in California launched a social media campaign encouraging shoppers to bring reusable bags. The ban was supposed to take effect tomorrow. It was postponed after fierce opposition by plastic bag companies. They gathered enough signatures for a ballot measure that would allow voters to repeal the ban next year. A flex alert is in effect. Everyone in the state is urged to conserve electricity. Sent out from the California ISO, take a look at today's outlook showing demand for energy hitting over 44,000 megawatts. The ISO offers all kinds of tips, including turning off unnecessary lights. The flex alert is in effect through tomorrow. A surprise to many San Diegans today as we witnessed rain, lightning, and thunder showers. Take a look at some of the images and video we found online. This one from Twitter. Cody Barbo captured a magnificent lightning strike in downtown San Diego. Perfect timing there. And rain in Murphy Canyon from the backyard of some military housing. This one courtesy of Anthony Johnson on Twitter. Another look at our forecast in San Diego. 70s by the beaches, some sunshine inland with 80s and 70s. Rain and lightning in the mountains with 80s and sunny skies. Later in the week, more rain and thunder showers in the desert with triple digits. Just a few days after the Supreme Court upheld same-sex marriage in all 50 states, the Navy hosted its first official West Coast LGBT Pride event today at North Island in Coronado. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Mento says the event might appear connected to the momentous decision, but organizers have worked for years to make it happen.
There was live music, colorful cupcakes, and portraits of gay, lesbian, and transgender veterans who served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, including Lisa Cove, who struggled for years to plan the Pride celebration.
In 2002, I wanted to have a Pride on this space to raise awareness and education for people to see the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people as people, just that simple. But during that time, there was Don't Ask, Don't Tell in place, so I wasn't allowed to do it.
Today's event comes nearly 4 years after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed and featured a panel of LGBT rights activists who took the mic to share their stories, including retired Army Colonel Sherry Swakowski, who served in the military for 35 years.
Reserve component, active duty, and I'm a transgender career infantry officer.
Swakowski says she didn't transition until she retired in 2004, but even then she was fired from her government contracting job. She found another, but says the public may not know a lot about transgender people, which can translate into fear.
So it's very important for us to tell our stories and educate and inform people so that we can stop the bullying and the harassment and the violence that leads to these transgender suicides.
3 San Diego County transgender teens have committed suicide this year. Today's event drew a few dozen attendees, including some in uniform. Organizers hope for a larger turnout when they bring the event back again next year. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
Almost a year ago, protesters in Murrieta blocked busloads of Central American migrant families who were being taken to a Border Patrol station. Today, a new report says the protest is an example of collusion between anti-immigrant groups and immigration officials. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero joins us from the newsroom with the story. Now, Jean, what exactly does this report say?
It says some border agents are working with anti-immigrant groups, using their talking points and leaking information. Those buses are an example. The report says a San Diego Border Patrol officer enabled the protest by giving the schedule to the organizers. The Center for New Community, which wrote the report, says the goal is to manipulate the broader immigration debate.
Have immigration officials made any kind of response to the report?
The report specifically mentioned the Border Patrol Union. I talked with its vice president, Sean Moran. He denies any collusion with anti-immigrant groups. He says those groups and Border Patrol officers sometimes express the same ideas because they sometimes think alike. There hasn't been any comment from the Border Patrol itself or from Customs and Border Protection. We've got a link to the report at kpbs.org.
Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero, thank you. We continue our coverage tonight on the progress of a project to turn ocean water into drinking water. Peggy Pico has an update on the Carlsbad Desalination Plant.
When completed, the $1 billion desalination plant will be the largest in the Western Hemisphere. This week, crews finished work on a 10-mile pipeline that connects the plant to San Diego's water distribution system. Here with the next steps is my guest, Jessica Jones, with Poseidon Water, the company building the plant. And Jessica, what's the significance of this pipeline?
The pipeline is what delivers the water from the plant in Carlsbad on the coast through 3 cities, Carlsbad, Vista, and San Marcos, to the San Diego County Water Authority's aqueduct in San Marcos. Once the water is delivered to the aqueduct, we're able to deliver the entire county with this new water supply.
So walk us through the process here, technically speaking. How do you take salt water and turn it into drinking water?
We pull 100 million gallons of seawater into the plant each day. We're able to get a 50% recovery, so we turn half into fresh drinking water, and the other half it has double the salt content, goes back out to the ocean.
And where's that water coming from? There's a lagoon, correct?
There is. The water comes from the Pacific Ocean and flows through Agua Hedionda Lagoon into our intake.
I see. What will this Carlsbad Desal plant actually do to provide water and meet the region's water needs?
The plant will be able to supply water to roughly 300,000 people every day. That's about 7 to 10% of San Diego County's water needs.
There has been some environmental concerns, though, raised about the energy it's going to take to power this plant and possible harm to marine life. You're putting extended salt or salt-denser water back into the ocean. How is Poseidon addressing those environmental concerns?
We had an extensive environmental review process during our permitting process, which lasted about 6 years. We had an entire team of scientists from Scripps Institute of Oceanography that looked at all of the impacts, both the intake of the water, the discharge of the salt, and there's no impact there on site. And for whatever impact there is, we'll be mitigating by restoring 66 acres of wetlands in South San Diego Bay. As far as the energy, it takes roughly only 30% more energy at our desal plant than it does to import water into the county. Currently, the county imports 90% of their water, and so to have a locally controlled, reliable water supply, it's just slightly more energy.
So when you're talking about that 30% more energy, the energy to get our water here, you're talking about having it pumped in? Is that what you're
pumped
talking about?
in over the mountains into the county.
Okay. What needs to happen before we actually get the water coming out of the faucets here in San Diego?
Over the next few months, we'll be testing the different components of the plant. Then once we are ready to turn the plant on, we will turn it on and send samples to the lab. The data will go to the Department of Drinking Water and the San Diego County Water Authority, and when everyone signs off, we will switch the pumps on and start delivering water.
And when will the testing start, and when do you expect it to be complete?
The testing will start early fall, and we're expected to be online November 2015.
Okay. How much of an increase are customers going to see on their water bill for this plant? It's a joint effort, I understand.
Yes, it's a joint effort with the San Diego County Water Authority. We have a 30-year water purchase agreement. They'll purchase the entire output from the plant at a fixed price. Once the plant's online this fall, customers in San Diego County can look to an increase to about $5 to $7 per month on their water bill.
And Carlsbad actually has a fixed rate, right, because of where the plant is?
No, Carlsbad customers will have the same increase.
The same increase. What do you want to say to people who are concerned about the safety of the water? How is your filter system actually going to filter out viruses or microbes or things like that?
The system is very, very safe. We actually, the water has less salt content in it when we're done than imported water supplies have that are coming out of your tap today. We're able to take not only the salt out, but we take out all of the viruses and bacteria, anything else that may be in the seawater, so much so that we actually have to add some minerals back into the water afterwards before we send it out in the delivery system.
And just remind us,
pure.
Right, remind us of how you take that out. That's through a very fine filter.
Yes, it goes through a reverse osmosis membrane, and the hole in those membranes are about 1/1,000,000th the diameter of a human hair, and so we're able to take out the salt and anything else that's in the water.
And there's a lot at stake for this because Poseidon is also planning some more desal plants, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of eyes on Carlsbad because there are other desal plants up and down the state that folks are looking into. Poseidon has a plant in Huntington Beach that is going through the permitting phase right now. We're hoping that we receive the last permit on that early next year and start construction on the second plant.
All right, Jessica Jones, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
The American Lung Association of California is announcing its Clean Air Challenge to increase awareness of the causes of lung disease and raise money for research. Atul Malhotra with UC San Diego School of Medicine says even researchers often don't realize the role air quality plays in lung diseases like COPD.
And they blame the victims. They say, well, this is cigarette smoking induced, so let's not bother doing research in emphysema or in chronic bronchitis. And in fact, that's not fair. When you look at the data now, there's more COPD that's non-smoking related worldwide than there is from cigarette smoking. If you look at air.
Sullivan Solar Power announced they will contribute $100 to research for every solar power system they install in San Diego between now and the end of December. Sullivan Solar Power is a KPBS underwriter. San Diego is one of many cities that are adopting recycling and composting. It's not always an easy transition, but a fast food chain in Washington state has found a simple solution to the complicated garbage sorting problem. EarthFix reporter Cassandra Protifita has the story.
Most fast food diners in Seattle have had this experience. Finish your meal, walk up to the 3 bins, and pause in confusion.
For a lot of customers, it's like, okay, where does this go?
Since 2010, Seattle's required restaurants to package food in either recyclable or compostable material. Restaurants also must provide 3 bins: garbage, recycling, and compost.
What we're thinking now is for most of the stuff that can hold solid food, like plates or bowls or clamshells, having it recyclable is not that helpful.
The problem became evident when a Northwest fast food chain took a closer look at what customers actually put in the bins. Wes Benson is the sustainability manager for Taco Time.
It really just took one person in a hurry to put the garbage in the recycle bin or the recycling in the compost bin, and so it had to go to the landfill anyway.
Toss plastic containers in the compost bin or food in the recycling, and it all becomes trash.
9 out of 10 bags of recyclables would end up going in the garbage. 9 out of 10 bags that were supposed to be compostable would have to go right in the trash.
After watching 90% of their recycling and compost get dumped in the garbage, they looked at a different approach.
How much more would it cost, instead of having some recyclables and some compostables, if we went to all compostable in the dining room?
They crunched the numbers and found that switching to all compostable wasn't nearly as expensive as they feared. They went back to a 1-bin system. Except now, the 1 bin is for compost.
No confusion, no standing there trying to decipher a sign. It's just all 1 bin, goes in there, and that's it.
And now the city of Seattle is considering rules that would require all restaurants to follow suit.
Our hope is that we'll get to the point where for most of the stuff that holds food, the requirement will be it needs to be compostable.
They hope fewer bins will lead to less confusion in the food court.
These are all, everything's compostable. Everything, yep.
And that was Cassandra Profita of EarthFix, a public media partnership made possible through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. A brush fire near the San Vicente Reservoir forced crews to close part of a highway today. Flames blackened about 3 acres alongside State Route 67. Firefighters say fire did not threaten any homes. Crews blocked off one northbound lane of the state route while extinguishing the flames, which took about 45 minutes. No word yet on what started the brush fire. Today marks the 30th anniversary of a devastating fire in Normal Heights. Santa Ana winds fueled flames that destroyed 76 homes and damaged 57 others. Peggy Pico explains how that canyon fire led to new policies on fire prevention.
Many people who now live in Normal Heights aren't even aware of the 1985 fire. At the time, though, it was the worst brush fire in San Diego's history. Joining me with what went wrong and how it's changed fire policy are San Diego Fire Department's Assistant Chief, Brian Fennessy, and Gary Weber, who evacuated his Normal Heights home during that fire. And Brian, I understand it was 96 degrees that day when the fire started in Normal Heights in a canyon above Interstate 8. What were some of the challenges that fire crews faced then as compared to now?
Well, certainly you mentioned it, the heat. The direction of the fire travel, it was moving eastbound. Normal upslope winds, provided fire to carry on up the canyons. And as it moved east and moved into those finger canyons, it would race up to the top and into the homes and start multiple homes on fire. So as it continued to do that, we ended up with ultimately 70 homes on fire that were destroyed.
Right, and you actually, it took a while. You started on the homes, I understand, and then it took till you got more resources to go down to the canyons where the source of the fire was.
You're absolutely right. The fire department invested all of its time and resources on those homes that were on fire. It finally took resources coming in from throughout the county and north of us to deal with the fire at the bottom of the hill to stop the fire progress.
Well, let's talk, Gary, about what happened to those homes. You evacuated your home. Describe what it was like in your neighborhood when this fast-moving fire was jumping from canyon to canyon and home to home.
I was riding around on a bicycle trying to stay on top of where the thing was, and it was everywhere. It was leaping streets, and the flames were 50 feet in the air, and it was like a holocaust. There was nothing that any garden hose or even fire hose was going to do to beat that thing down. It was just running wild.
Well, speaking of which, Brian, there were a lot of homes damaged. No one died, I understand. Correct. But one of the reasons you brought up is these garden hoses weren't working. People were trying to water down their houses. What was the situation there with the water pressure?
This morning I talked with a now retired division chief that was at that fire, and he said one of the big challenges was because we had so much equipment, so many fire engines up at the top where the homes were burning, they were all connected to the fire hydrants, and water supply was an issue. Those water mains at the time were 6 inches, and so literally you've got everybody trying to draw that water, which affected the neighborhoods and the community from using the garden hoses.
So what's it like now then because of that?
Well, there are routine tests that the fire companies do on the hydrants. My understanding is that those water mains have been replaced. Water supply is no longer an issue. However, we would prefer, obviously, as the fire department, if we're in there protecting homes, that we ask the residents to leave and not use their garden hoses. Our concern is for their personal safety.
Okay. And Gary, now I know San Diegans can see this fire, as you were talking about, it was so immense from Mission Valley, but your parents, I understand, were actually in Cincinnati, but they found out about it.
I am from Cincinnati, so is my family, and the Reds and Padres were playing that afternoon in Jack Murphy Stadium, and they wondered what was going on because they know where I live. They had been there, and the cameras were tuned up on the hill looking at this thing between innings, and I had many calls on my answering machine, which I had just got at the time, wondering where we were.
Well, you say your answering machine because, of course, there was no social media. There was no reverse 911 calls. Did your house survive? Was everyone okay?
Our house was fine. The airdrops got in around 6 o'clock in the evening, I think, just as it was approaching our canyon, and knocked it down. So we were covered in soot and digging out from ash forever, but our house was left alone.
And Brian, because of this fire, San Diego actually changed some policies on fire prevention. I'm thinking of a brush abatement and defensible space. So where does that stand today?
Those are all very common terms now, and you're correct. Back then it was a 30 feet of defensible space. I don't even think they used the term defensible space. Today it's 100 feet. And we do inspections all over the city like we'd never done prior to that.
And does the fire department do brush abatement then still?
We will still, the fire department goes and identifies the parcels that need the work to be done. Parks and Rec, then Parks and Recreation, then goes ahead and either contracts or has nonprofits do the actual work for the property that the city is responsible.
All right. Well, Assistant Fire Chief Brian Fennessy and Gary Weber, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, James Taylor on his latest hit album, his first with all new songs in more than a decade. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
The Overnight, which opened over the weekend, has been stirring buzz since its premiere at Sundance earlier this year. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando sat down and spoke with the actor-producer Adam Scott about this indie sex comedy.
My character and Taylor Schilling's character, Taylor Schilling from Orange is the New Black, we're new to Los Angeles. We don't know a soul. We're with our young son at the park. We run into Jason Schwartzman and his son. They invite us over to their house for a play date / pizza party. And once we're over there, he and his wife convince us to stick around, put the kids to bed, and maybe hang out. And we do, and it turns into the craziest night of our lives.
Call it a playdate for adults, and it pushes the young couple past their comfort zone to raise issues that are connecting with audiences.
A lot of kind of issues that couples face when they've been together for a while and you hit a certain age and you kind of feel like your days of reinvention might be behind you. And I think these characters are due for a big change, a reinvention of sorts, and they don't really know it. And it just sort of happens to them over the period of a few hours, and their whole world gets turned upside down.
What gives this sex comedy a fresh twist is that writer-director Patrick Bryce comes from horror.
A friend of mine kind of aptly described The Overnight as a horror movie where sex is the monster. You know, it's the thing creeping around every corner. We've had screenings where people are yelling at the screen, like, don't do it, don't go in there. So there is a real tension through the whole movie that really works well, and I think a lot of kind of the release that people get from that tension is laughter.
And the result is a painful but hilarious comedy.
This is California. Maybe this is what dinner parties are like.
Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On KPBS Midday Edition, San Diego Humane Society President Gary Weitzman joins us to discuss a new policy being unveiled at county shelters. And on Morning Edition, San Diego's index of leading economic indicators has climbed to its highest level in more than 8 years. We'll have more tomorrow on KPBS Radio. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.